Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. Ukraine's long-range precision drone strikes targeting Russia's critical infrastructure is slowly changing the nature of this war. While Russia has tried to continue with its steady war of attrition, Ukraine appears to be doing something that is qualitatively different. Wave after wave of long-range Ukrainian drones have effectively either shut down or suspended almost all major central Russian oil refineries. The plan is fairly simple, but executing it is way more complicated. And few had expected that Ukraine will be carrying out these long-range drone attacks with such devastating impact. Even the Russian capital Moscow and the adjoining suburbs have not been spared. In 2026, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has claimed that net-net, Ukraine has managed to claw back as much as about 590 square kilometers of territory. And it is Russia that is now losing land in this war. So has Ukraine slowly but steadily managed to turn the tide of this war? Our next report explores. This is a residential building in Krasnogorsk in the Moscow region. Despite a tightly guarded airspace, Ukrainian drones smashed into the structure, killing at least 4 people. The Russian air defenses managed to destroy about 81 drones that were headed for Moscow, making it one of the largest such attacks on the capital in over a year. 12 people were injured, mostly near the entrance of Moscow's oil refinery, while 3 homes were damaged. Russia's largest airport, located in Moscow, had some drone debris fall on it. Through these attacks, Ukraine has signaled that nowhere in Russia is safe and guarded from its ability to strike. But the real damage is being inflicted on Russia's oil refining infrastructure. Virtually all major oil refineries in central Russia have been forced to halt or scale back their fuel output following the Ukrainian drone attacks in recent days. Russia has already introduced a fuel exports ban starting from April until the end of July. The combined capacity of refineries that have either fully or partially halted their operations exceeds 83 million metric tons per year. That is around 238,000 tons per day. That accounts for almost about 1/4 of Russia's total refining capacity. The Ukrainian strikes have also targeted pipelines and storage facilities, reducing Russia's oil output, the world's 3rd largest after the US and Saudi Arabia, adding pressure to Moscow's federal budget, where oil and gas taxes account for almost about 1/4 of the revenue. Amongst the targeted oil refineries are the Kirishi in western Russia, the Moscow oil refinery, as well as plants in Nizhny Novgorod on the Volga River, Ryazan and Yaroslavl. One of Russia's largest refineries, the Kirishi, with a capacity of about 20 million metric tons per year, has been fully shut since the 5th of May.
No, the Kremlin does not see such risks. Indeed, production may decline in some areas. This is also due to seasonal maintenance. But overall, the entire fuel balance has been calculated and has the necessary compensation system. As always, our Russian Ministry of Energy is keeping this issue under constant review.
For its part, Russia is again demonstrating its nuclear capabilities. On the 21st of May, Russia launched a Yars ballistic missile and a Zircon hypersonic missile as part of missile tests during joint nuclear drills with Belarus. As part of the drills, Russia also displayed a Burey-class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, the Il-38 anti-submarine aircraft, a MiG-31 armed with Kinzhal hypersonic missile, and the RS-24 Yars intercontinental ballistic missiles. According to Russian sources, the nuclear drills are in preparation for any event of enemy aggression.
Today, as part of the exercises, we are conducting the first joint training of the Russian and Belarusian armies in the control of strategic and tactical nuclear forces. I have already noted and will emphasize again The use of such weapons, nuclear weapons, is an extreme, exceptional measure to ensure the national security of our states. At the same time, given the growing tensions in the world and the emergence of new threats and risks, our nuclear triad must, as before, serve as a reliable guarantor of the sovereignty of the Union State of Russia and Belarus, ensuring the achievement of strategic deterrence, maintaining nuclear parity, and the balance of power at the global level.
But there is a subtle shift that is happening on the ground. It is still too early to say if it is an inflection point in this war. But it is Ukraine that now appears to be dictating the tempo of the war with its long-range precision drones.
As I said yesterday, the Russians need to think about their refineries, their oil facilities, their enterprises, and not about how to disrupt the lives of other peoples in Ukraine, Moldova, or any other neighboring country. Today, the activity indicators show that our proactive operations per day are higher than those of the Russians, and this is a very serious result. We will increase all forms of supply for our army: drones, ground robots, shells, all resources to maintain proper protection and our active frontline operations.
Donald Trump, who had berated Zelensky at the White House by saying that he does not hold any cards, also appears to very quietly notice this change. Reversing his recent announcement of drawing down US troops from Europe, the United States is now sending 5,000 more troops to Poland, inching ever closer to Russia. The shift is subtle, but its strategic impact is not lost on anyone.
This is not a decision that was made on the back of a napkin. I mean, this has been an ongoing process involving other countries as well and the contributions they can make. It's not just our force posture, it's what other countries can contribute as well to come up with something that works for NATO and that's realistic and that allows us to force posture, for example, in a true front conflict. So, but again, this is all technical work that's being done by military people. These are not political decisions.
Marco Rubio admits that the decision is not a political one. But what will be interesting to see is the Russian response to the positioning of the US forces ever closer to its territory. A US congressional research report has laid bare the losses suffered by the Americans in the Iran war so far. 42 aircraft were either downed or damaged in a span of 40 days. The very first losses came on the 2nd of March, when the Americans claimed that a Kuwaiti Air Force F-18 Hornet had mistakenly shot down 3 F-15E Strike Eagles over Kuwait. All American pilots managed to eject and were later recovered alive. The shoot-down occurred during active combat that included attacks from Iranian aircraft, ballistic missiles and drones. But the Americans explained this incident to be a case of friendly fire. A 4th F-15 fighter jet was shot down over Iran on the 3rd of April, with both crew members recovered in separate search and rescue operations. A KC-135 Stratotanker went down over western Iraq on the 12th of March during a refueling sortie, killing all 6 crew members on board. But the loss, according to the CENTCOM, was not the result of hostile or friendly fire. A second KC-135 that was involved in the same incident managed to land safely at the Ben Gurion airport in Israel. The toll on the American tanker fleet grew just 2 days later when the Iranian missiles and drones struck the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, damaging as many as about 5 more of the KC-135s on the ground and taking the total tanker losses to 7. But the biggest casualty was this F-35A Lightning stealth fighter jet that took Iranian ground fire on the 19th of March, but still, according to the Americans, managed to return to the base. Now, Iran hit the Prince Sultan Air Base again on the 27th of March, damaging an E-3 Sentry airborne warning and control aircraft. The congressional research report says that the E-3 had been parked on an unprotected taxiway. And then on the 3rd of April, an A-10 Thunderbolt went down after taking enemy fire, during a search and rescue mission. The pilot managed to eject and was later recovered safely. American drones meanwhile took the heaviest beating, accounting for 25 of the 42 losses. The list includes at least 24 MQ-9 Reaper drones and one MQ-4C Triton that was lost apparently in a mishap that was reported on the 14th of April. For decades, the American fighter jets had dominated the skies of West Asia almost unchallenged. But the Iran war has changed that dynamic. The F-35 is the world's most advanced stealth fighter, and yet the fact that it was spotted over the Iranian skies and then shot at has raised several uncomfortable questions. The MQ-4C Triton is a top-line American drone that costs a staggering $250 million. That is more than the cost of an F-35 and an F-15 fighter jet combined. Donald Trump will be looking at these losses very closely before he makes a decision on whether to restart the Iran war. On the 14th of May, more than 50 boats taking part in the Gaza Sumud Flotilla set sail from Turkey. On board were hundreds of pro-Palestinian activists from dozens of countries bringing some amount of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip in their bid to breach the Israeli blockade that has caused severe shortage of food, medicines and other essential supplies. On the 18th of May, the fleet was intercepted in international waters west of Cyprus by armed Israeli naval commandos. A couple of days later, Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir sparked widespread outrage and an international diplomatic backlash after posting a video where he's seen taunting and even pushing down the detained activists to the ground. The next day, Israel, which has dismissed the activists' action as a PR stunt at the service of Hamas, said that it had deported all foreign activists seized by its forces from the Gaza-bound flotilla. Our next report tells you more.
Gaza has been under blockade since 2007, with Israel in control of all entry points into the besieged coastal enclave. Since the start of the Gaza war, sparked by Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack on Israel, the once picturesque enclave has suffered severe shortages of food, medicine and other essential supplies, with Israel halting aid deliveries completely several times. In the latest attempt to breach this Israeli blockade of Gaza, hundreds of activists from more than 40 countries around the world set sail from Turkey on the 14th of May in around 50 vessels under the Gaza Sumud Flotilla. On Monday morning, about 250 nautical miles from the coast of Gaza, armed Israeli naval commandos intercepted the fleet in international waters west of Cyprus. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, lavishing praise on Israel's naval forces for intercepting the Gaza-bound aid flotilla, said that the troops had thwarted a malicious scheme. The pro-Palestinian activists, arrested in international waters and held at Israel's Kidziat prison in the Negev desert near Gaza, were beaten, tortured and humiliated, leading to an outcry that the treatment they were subjected to wasn't different from what Palestinians experience on a daily basis. Adding insult to injury, Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir on Wednesday posted a video captioned "Welcome to Israel," showing himself heckling and taunting activists kneeling with their hands tied behind their backs. An international diplomatic backlash from Italy to Spain and Australia to Canada followed soon after. In a rare instance, he was also criticized at home by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Foreign Minister Gideon Saar, as well as by US Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. The very next day, following global outcry over the treatment of activists in custody, Israel said that it had deported all the foreign activists seized by its forces from the Gaza-bound flotilla. The Gaza flotilla activists, however, returned not just tortured, harassed and humiliated, but each with a tale of harrowing ordeal.
Well, they've beaten us everywhere. It's been worse than in Guantanamo. It's been, well, such humiliation, such beatings that no one can even imagine it. But for Palestine, nothing is too much.
Broken ribs, they took my glasses, I can't see. They took my hearing aids, I can't hear.
Sorry,
what's your name?
Sumud means the future. Sumud means holding the murderous hordes to account. Sumud means, God willing, taking part in even larger organizations in the future. We now have a global organization.
Amidst the horrific escalation and violence perpetrated by Israel on these flotilla activists, the resolve and the never-say-die spirit of these battered and bruised activists is a ray of hope.
On the 16th of May, the Nigerian army said that in a meticulously planned and highly complex operation in which it worked very closely with the US Africa Command, Abu Bilal al-Minuki, ISIS's global second-in-command, was killed. A couple of days later, the US Africa Command said that in coordination with the Nigerian government, it had carried out some additional airstrikes against the so-called Islamic State in northeastern Nigeria on the 17th of May. And then on the 19th of May, the Nigerian army said that in recent days, as many as about 175 Islamic State militants had been killed in a series of joint air and ground strikes in the country's northeast. Our next report tells you more.
The Federal Republic of Nigeria is plagued with insecurity on multiple fronts, including a 17-year-long Islamist insurgency in its northeast, separatist violence in the southeast, and frequent deadly clashes between farmers and herders in the central region. Since late last year, the Nigerian government has been under pressure from the United States, which has accused it of not doing enough to combat the Islamist militant threat. Hundreds of troops have been deployed by the United States to Nigeria in a bid to support and train the Nigerian troops. On the 16th of May, first the American President Donald Trump and then his Nigerian counterpart Bola Ahmed Tinubu announced that Abu Bilal al-Minuki, the second-in-command of ISIS globally, had been killed along with several of his lieutenants in a joint operation conducted by US and Nigerian forces during a strike on his compound in the Lake Chad Basin. The joint operation, carried out under Nigeria's ongoing counterinsurgency initiative, commenced almost immediately at midnight and concluded around 4 a.m. local time on Saturday and was executed with no casualties or loss of assets. According to the US Federal Register, al-Minuki, a Nigerian national, was a specially designated global terrorist by the Biden administration in 2023, and his death dealt a heavy blow to the ranks of the Islamic State. The Nigerian army said that the strike was carried out in Metele in Borno State. It is to be noted that the Borno State has endured an insurgency waged by Boko Haram and its splinter group, Islamic State, West Africa Province, for 17 years that has killed thousands and displaced 2 million people. Continuing the counterinsurgency operation, the US military said 2 days later that Nigeria and the United States carried out fresh strikes on Sunday against Islamic State militants in northeast Nigeria. On Monday, the US Africa Command, in tandem with Nigerian forces, conducted additional kinetic strikes against ISIS in northeastern Nigeria. On Tuesday, the Nigerian Defense Headquarters claimed that in recent days, Nigerian forces, working with the United States, have killed 175 Islamic State militants in a series of joint air and ground strikes in the country's northeast. Reportedly, the joint strikes destroyed checkpoints, weapons caches, logistics hubs, and financing networks. According to Crisis Monitoring Group, armed conflict location and event data, since suffering major setbacks in West Asia, Islamic State has pivoted toward Africa, which accounted for 86% of the group's global activity in the first 3 months of 2026. Will this ongoing campaign by the United States and the Nigerian government to hunt down and destroy the militants finally solve the insecurity problem?
Bolivia has been rocked by weeks of widespread protests. Thousands of anti-government protesters have taken to the streets of the capital La Paz and other cities to express frustration with Bolivia's right-wing president Rodrigo Paz's free market reforms. The protests have come amidst the Andean nation's worst economic ordeal in the past 4 decades, with year-on-year inflation hitting 14% in April. In a bid to quell the protests, President Rodrigo Paz announced reshuffling of his cabinet on the 20th of May. But is it a case of too little, too late? Our next report tells you more.
Bolivia is in the midst of one of its worst economic crises in decades. The Andean nation has been besieged by weeks-long anti-government protests that began with strikes early this month and have since grown into a nationwide movement involving labor unions, miners, transport workers, and rural groups. Thousands of furious and frustrated farmers, miners, teachers, workers from other sectors and indigenous communities have been calling for wage increases, economic stability, and an end to the privatization of state-owned companies. The protests, mainly calling for President Rodrigo Paz to resign, intensified Monday as demonstrators swarmed government buildings and a protest leader faced terrorism charges over the unrest. For hours, riot police clashed with protesters. Tear gas shrouded the streets of capital La Paz. Shops were shuttered and supplies ran low due to protest blockades choking routes into the capital city. It is to be noted that conservative Rodrigo Paz assumed the presidency less than 6 months ago following 2 decades of socialist rule. Soon after assuming office, he scrapped 2-decade-old fuel subsidies that had drained the Treasury's international dollar reserves, but so far has failed to stabilize fuel supplies, angering the working class.
The truth is, this government has to go if it doesn't want bloodshed. They have to leave peacefully. In 6 months, they've indebted us too much, and with their decrees, they're trying to manipulate us. People are fed up.
While no official arrest tally has been released, reportedly more than 100 protesters have been detained. Continuing a wave of protest on Wednesday, thousands of Bolivians filled the streets of La Paz demanding the president's resignation. A couple of days earlier, the Bolivian Highway Administration had reported at least 32 roadblocks on the country's highways. The blockades have resulted in fuel and food shortages, which have aggravated daily living conditions of families. International concern has been mounting over the unrest, with banks closing branches in La Paz. So, what has been the response of the embattled President Rodrigo Paz? Addressing a news conference on Wednesday, the Bolivian president said that he would reshuffle his ministers in a bid to ease tensions with anti-government protesters.
We are forming the Economic and Social Council, where we will invite everyone who wants to participate in government to help build a collaborative government. As you know, we have a series of proposed regulations, but I don't want some ill-intentioned individuals, because these aren't sectors, they're specific groups, specific people, to say tomorrow, when we present the regulations, no, that's meant to privatize, or no, that's meant to raise rates. And on behalf of the government, I would like to announce that we are not only going to reshuffle the cabinet, we must reshuffle a cabinet that is capable of listening. The president cannot be everywhere.
While Paz acknowledged frustrations in his remarks on Wednesday, the depiction of the protests as dangerous and anti-democratic by his government hasn't helped matters. Paz also slammed Colombian President Gustavo Petro for recent comments describing the protests as a popular insurrection. Former leftist President Evo Morales, who has been in hiding since 2024 but continues to exert influence over the country's politics, has expressed support for the demonstrations. The Andean nation finds itself at a critical juncture in its history, both economically and politically, and it would only be apt to keep a watch over the next few days.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.